I played football, basketball, cross country, and track in high school. I played soccer before that.
Josh Wheeler is a guy after my own heart. We have a lot in common.
I've done a lot of different sports over the years, and I've loved all of them.
Okay, so I haven't loved all sports I played, and I didn't play most sports competitively. We do have other things in common. We both grew up in Southern Oregon and eventually attended Brigham Young University. I graduated in 1998.
I didn't know what I was doing, so I didn't finish.
Josh and I also know how to ride motorcycles, though I haven't been on one since I was a teenager. I would guess everyone who's been on a motorbike has had some sort of accident, but my worst crash doesn't compare with Josh's.
Well, I was 26. I was driving my motorcycle home from my brother's graduation party from BYU, and lady wasn't paying attention and hit me, and I broke my neck and my back and a lot of other things. I have a spinal cord injury, so because of the spinal cord injury, my legs are paralyzed. I actually took about 11 months before I became independent again.
Josh's independence would come in the form of a wheelchair.
There was ups and downs.
But one of his ups was finding sports again after moving back to Oregon.
I met a guy who played wheelchair basketball, and I played a little bit with them. And then I went back to Utah, and somebody from the Utah wheelchair rugby team came in and asked me if I wanted to come to a practice. And so I went to a practice, and I fell in love with it.
He joined the team and started playing in tournaments.
And so I played against the University of Arizona team quite a bit, and they were at a whole different level than us. They were a lot better than us.
Josh's Utah team decided to play just for fun.
So with a lot of thinking, a lot of contemplating, a lot of weighing my options, I decided to go to play down in Tucson and at U of A.
Let's be honest. I didn't even know the University of Arizona had a wheelchair rugby team, but they have so much more than that, and it's so much more than sports.
I will forever be appreciative to the University of Arizona. It's been something that has enabled me to be able to do something after sport.
Welcome to BYU Radio's Big Stories, telling the amazing and inspiring tales from the Big 12 and beyond. I'm your host, Cleon Wall. Our episode, Inspiring Greatness, Arizona's Adaptive Sports Legacy.
That's the power of sport.
When trying to find great stories for the show, I usually start out with a very broad internet search to see if anything seems like a big story. Something that will inspire everyone to do better and be better. While I was searching, I found a YouTube video from the Pac-12 network from 2019. Kate Scott was interviewing Arizona Adaptive Athletics Director Pete Hughes about their wheelchair basketball team and star player Joshua Brewer.
We're ranked 5th in the nation right now, and we beat the number 3 team in the nation this last weekend in Sacramento, so we're really excited about that. We'll be playing in the national championships in Cleveland area at the end of March.
As I listened, I started searching for how many universities have wheelchair basketball or other adaptive sports. There weren't many, and the majority of programs were not in the Western United States. Then Pete said something else that caught my attention.
I think frequently people still think, oh, it's just a feel-good story. We do inspire, but we aim to inspire through our athletic ability, not the fact that we're just out here, playing a sport.
That sounded like a big story to me. I knew I needed to visit Pete in Southern Arizona to find out more about the program and the people who make up the program. Pete invited me inside of the University of Arizona's Disability Resource Center and immediately gave me a tour of their weight room.
You'll see the equipment is accessible, so if you want to work out in your wheelchair without a transfer, you can do that. One of the big things for wheelchair users is the amount of transfers. It is damaging to your shoulders, right? Because it's an awkward movement, so you want to limit those as much as possible if you can. We build our strength and conditioning to prevent overuse syndrome, and so a lot of our personal trainers are working on like balance, making sure you work out your back muscles, make sure that you do some backwards pushing, and also try to eliminate the fatigue syndrome of a long seasons. We also have a wheelchair shop over here. So these are some of our wheelchair racers that we're fixing up.
Pete is a former Wildcat adaptive athlete and coach, but his path to adaptive sports came begrudgingly. He thought his destiny lied in coaching football.
I got a volunteer job coaching in La Jolla High School,
and fell in love with that. The next year I was the head coach of a freshman team, and I was successful everywhere. Then I went to Banning. We went to the CIF championship as an offensive coordinator, and I just wasn't getting the head coaching jobs. I was young, I was cocky, and I was like, oh, it's because I didn't play.
So he decided to get a sports psychology degree in Australia so that he could be a better coach.
My professor said, I want you to work with the wheelchair sports teams in Australia. And I was like, oh gosh, I just wasn't really interested. Never had been in a wheelchair, and I walked in and there was, I think, 4 Paralympians on that court. And you could immediately see how elite they were. Dave Bonavita, who was a Paralympic track coach, I got assigned to work with him. We became good friends, and he said, you're too young and aggressive not to play. You should play. And I'm like, but a chair doesn't fit.
Pete's condition prevented him from using a regular wheelchair.
I was born with a condition called arthrogryposis, which is irregular curvature of the joints. So in my case, my hips, knees, and ankles are fused. I can walk. I walk like a penguin or Frankenstein, and was called that frequently.
His straight legs didn't deter Dave Bonavita.
He owned a wheelchair company, and he made me a wheelchair for my work with his wheelchair rugby team. He was the coach, and then he was a player on the wheelchair basketball team.
Just like Josh Wheeler, playing sports transformed Pete. He eventually returned to the United States to coach football and to play competitive wheelchair sports. Many of his younger teammates were being recruited to play at the University of Arizona.
Then I went home belly aching to my wife about it, and she's like, let's go. You want to go? Take a sabbatical? Go get your PhD or go back to school. And University of Arizona offered me a scholarship to play at the ripe age of 34 or whatever I was.
When Pete's wife got pregnant, he moved into a coaching position and eventually became the director of athletics.
I'm so passionate about this, and I drive my wife crazy because we'll go to a movie and I'll see somebody limping, and I'll run up to him. Hey, is that permanent? Have you heard about wheelchair sports? I'm in people's faces about the opportunity because I missed it.
Pete wouldn't even have this opportunity at Arizona if it weren't for some wounded warriors.
There were a couple individuals that were back from Vietnam, and they were injured and they wanted to play sports. They didn't want to just sit around. And so they reached out to the director at the time. The director applied for a grant in 1973, and he got that grant, and they started the first wheelchair basketball program in 1974.
The Wildcats adaptive sports program has grown a lot since that first wheelchair basketball team.
The official sports that we have are men's and women's wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis, wheelchair track and road racing. Those are the 4 that have collegiate competition. Then we have wheelchair rugby, para-triathlon, and para-swim, where we don't really have collegiate competition. I forgot to add adaptive golf. Adaptive golf is really exciting for me because it allows us to help support students that are visually impaired or maybe can't push a wheelchair, like an individual with cerebral palsy that has trouble pushing a wheelchair or catching a ball, might be able to strike a golf ball. So my philosophy is, if you're a student at the U of A and you want to play an adaptive sport and you come to me and say, Pete, I want to play bocce ball, or Pete, I want to play power soccer. I don't know how to do it, but I'll figure it out and we'll get some support.
Pete has also transformed the department. It's become a bit more exclusive.
Originally, anybody with a disability here that wanted to play sports was covered by the University of Arizona. And so the transition really is when I became the director, we moved to students only here in this program.
That is just probably the biggest change that we've seen, and the work ethic goes up.
This is men's wheelchair basketball coach Michael Beardsley.
The drive is a lot higher because they're still young and they all have these goals and dreams that they can still achieve.
What makes the University of Arizona such a draw for adaptive athletes?
I would say our Disability Resource Center is top-notch. There are no issues here when it comes to accessibility. If your classroom is not accessible, they move the whole class for that individual. They have accessible seating in almost every lecture hall. And it's amazing. You come here, every building is built with universal design, so all the doors are big. They don't have to worry about getting in and out. So I think that is a huge, huge draw as far as being in a wheelchair and being a student.
We have great support from the University Scholarship Office, and we're able to give all of our athletes on an athletic scholarship, as well as most of them are on academic scholarships as well. So we're able to provide that kind of support.
And that is our goal, is that everyone comes out of here debt-free.
Pete has big dreams for his teams.
The short-term vision is to start increasing and moving towards a more equitable experience.
And to give the athletes their due.
I just think that if we advertise it correctly, maybe we could sell out McHale for the collegiate wheelchair basketball championships, and give our athletes the spotlight.
Coming up next on Big Stories, the Wildcat athletes whose lives have changed because of their Arizona opportunities, and how they inspire their athletic director. Hey everyone, Cleon Wall here again. I'm inviting you to check out another BYU radio podcast. It's called Deep Blue. It's where you get the true stories of BYU athletes and coaches from their own mouths. It's hosted by my colleague, Jason Shepard. Last season, they had great interviews on Deep Blue, including Cougar quarterback Gary Bohannon. He teared up quite a bit talking about his son and what it means for his boy to watch his dad play. Also, BYU swimmer Jordan Tiffany, who quit swimming due to mental health struggles. He talked about how he was able to get back in the pool again. More great conversations for season number 3. BYU running back Hinckley Rapati will talk about his tear-filled journey to BYU. Former BYU tight end Chad Lewis, he's going to reflect back on that special 1996 BYU football season. And BYU basketball players Richie Saunders and Fuseni Traore discuss their unique relationship. It started way before they got to BYU. Please subscribe and listen to Deep Blue with Jason Shepard wherever you get podcasts, or check it out on the BYU radio app. This is the Big Stories podcast episode, Inspiring Greatness, Arizona's Adaptive Sports Legacy. Back in 1974, the Arizona Wildcats Adaptive Athletics program was born with a single wheelchair basketball team. Now they have several sports teams, and that basketball team is a powerhouse in the collegiate division. Garnett Silver Hall will have more on that in a moment. Now, Garnett is just one of the Wildcat wheelchair basketball players. He showed off his mad skills to me inside the Student Recreation Center on the U of A campus. The Northern California native dribbled, shot, and moved around with ease while sitting in his custom wheelchair.
You got to think about in wheelchair basketball like momentum. The more you can keep moving constantly, the easier it is to move faster,
Garnett was silky smooth rolling around the gym, living up to his namesake.
My mom is a big fan of reggae music, and one of her favorite artists was a singer named Garnett Silk.
He's also silky smooth with a microphone. This is Garnett singing his original song, Top Shelf Freestyle.
Look, said I got people looking down on me because I can't always reach the highest shelf. But
I'm an audio engineering and studio production major here at the U of A. I recently started putting out and producing my own music, so I'm on the track.
Garnett could be the next Bay Area music legend, but his bright future could have been clouded with doubt and despair.
I was born with a condition called arthrogryposis, and basically that translates to a curving of the joints. So basically, most of the joints in my body are affected.
He used different modes of transportation to get around as a kid. He started out with a walker and then progressed to wheels.
I'd grown up sitting on a skateboard, and I'd ride around the skateboard everywhere. I started using a wheelchair primarily in about 3rd grade. I just found it was a lot easier for me. I was a lot faster. I could hang out with my friends a lot better. It was just easier.
Then a chance encounter changed the trajectory of Garnett's life.
About 10 years old, I was going to the movies with my dad, and we ran into another family with a child with a disability, and they told us about this program out of Berkeley called Bay Area Outreach and Recreation Program, and the sport called sled hockey, and I totally fell in love with it. It was the first time I'd been part of a team of people with close to the same abilities as me, people that had shared experiences with me. And I think even as a child, it's something I didn't know I needed at the time, but looking back, it's something that I definitely did need to have that connection with like-minded people.
Next up, wheelchair basketball. At least Coach Trooper Johnson wanted him to give it a try.
I was hesitant, I think mainly because of the way I push a wheelchair. As I said before, my arms don't bend fully, so I have a pretty unique way of pushing a chair. But about 2 years in, he finally got me in a basketball chair. And I started picking that up too, and I was like, all right, I can figure this out as well. So at that point, I was fully bought in to adaptive sports and playing for Coach Johnson.
We've known each other since I first started.
This is Ben Thornton.
I mean, we both came up out of the same team.
As a young child, Ben needed a heart transplant and was put on life support.
While I was on life support, a blood clot was formed and it was released towards my spine. So I was left with a incomplete spinal cord injury, level L5 S1 vertebrae.
His days of walking without some kind of support were done.
I was always the only kid in a wheelchair at my school growing up, K through 12. So obviously I made friends, but I couldn't really connect with them at that level.
Just like Garnett, wheelchair sports was a game changer for him, though his mom was a bit nervous when she took him to play basketball.
When I first got in the gym, right, you walk in and there's chairs flying everywhere, and my mom was like freaking out. And, you know, I flipped for the first time and she starts running out on the court. And my trooper was like, okay, this is going to happen like every day. Can't be running out on the court like that. And it was just those moments, right?
Ben just kept getting better and better.
I think beginning my either freshman or sophomore year of high school, I started going to summer camps that were hosted at the colleges that had wheelchair basketball teams.
The University of Missouri and Auburn University were interested in his basketball services. He didn't even think about playing for the Wildcats from Tucson.
Now, it might not make sense, but University of Arizona used to compete against strictly men's teams. They didn't compete against other colleges. So they weren't really on my radar. I wanted to play collegiate basketball because, I mean, it's a super cool opportunity, right?
Eventually, Arizona returned to the collegiate division and offered Ben a scholarship his senior year of high school.
It was crazy. I remember the day like it was yesterday. Yeah, I mean, just compared to what other offers I was getting, it was just different. And not only that, but the family at Arizona was way different than anything I had seen at other schools.
Oh, and Garnett also accepted a scholarship to play for the Cats.
Like me and my best friend could come play basketball together in college. And just, yeah, the whole journey we had been on from day one, it just seemed right to continue that.
We ended up being roommates for 2 years.
The wheelchair basketball teammates had to adjust to college and playing for a full-time coach who wanted to practice a lot.
We do official practice 5 days a week, which is a 2-hour session.
This is Ben and Garnett's coach, Michael Beardsley.
And then we do 2 sessions that are purely scrimmage, where we work on game scenarios or lineups. And then the guys work out 3 times a week in groups right here in our gym.
So that was one of the hardest things for me to adjust to coming into college. But now, I mean, I love it. I get to play basketball every day with my teammates, see my coaches every day. And I have never progressed more.
Ben Thornton, he's our captain. He is a big success story. Wasn't highly recruited. He came in and he got mono the first year. So basically didn't play for 2 years, comes out, an All-American. Now he's a fringe USA player.
Ben graduated with his bachelor's degree and is now pursuing his master's. He was a 4.0 student, which is remarkable when taking into account the Wildcats' crazy playing schedule.
When we play 4 games in a weekend, typically 3 games on a Friday and 1 on a Saturday. We play 6 tournaments a year, so we're getting in about 24 to 27 games, give or take. I think we travel more than anybody. We're the only school west of Texas, so we have to fly everywhere, where everyone else can bus. But it's fun. You know, a lot happens on those road trips, and there's a lot of team bonding and, you know, just messing around.
But this team wasn't messing around during the 2022-2023 season.
We locked in, and we went undefeated that following year until the national championship.
We had such a strong team that year that it kind of boosted our ego way too much.
A little bit overconfident coming into that game undefeated the entire season.
Alabama beat them in the title game.
You know, you live and you learn, right? There's always lessons that have to be learned with anything.
It gave us, you know, more fire to come back the next season. It was almost the same story. We didn't go undefeated. We made it back to the championship, and we lost again. So, yeah, it's been rough. It's hard coming that close 2 times and not being able to get there. I think we also have to focus on, you know, this program, we've brought this program up from base level to where we're at now. We need to be proud of ourselves in that aspect, but obviously we want the win.
I think that would be a huge step for us to win a title, and we have our eyes on it.
Women's wheelchair basketball coach Josie Aslakson knows what it's like to compete at the highest level, playing for Team USA at the 2024 Paralympic Games.
We ended with silver against a very, very talented team. So I wouldn't say disappointed with that outcome, but I would say we're hungry.
She's just as hungry to turn her Wildcats into champions. Arizona took 4th place in the final tournament of the 2024 season.
Our team is in that building phase still, so our realistic timeline is just laying that foundation year to year, get a 3rd place finish or a 1st place finish. And that's what we're hungry for right now, because those 4th place finishes ending on a loss, it's tough, Josie's
path to becoming the head coach of the women's team is fascinating. When she was 5, she was involved in a car accident that led to a spinal cord injury.
I was in a wheelchair right from the start.
At age 10, she found adaptive sports, and at age 13, she started playing basketball. She was good enough to receive a scholarship from the University of Texas at Arlington.
The Lady Moving Mavs. Texas got the old school team names, but yeah, that's what was on our uniforms. We got a national title my sophomore year, so that was super fun and kind of just showed that we made the right decision. And then I ended up transferring from Texas because it wasn't the right fit for me, academically, and just I had other things that I wanted in my life besides basketball.
She wanted to attend New York University.
I was really drawn to NYU's screenwriting program. So I got into NYU and I was like, well, that's crazy. I feel like I have to go pursue that opportunity because that's such a selective school to get into. I made it through a year, but NYU was great. It was just the accessibility was just terrible in New York. I mean, no offense, I love New York for other reasons, but it just the lifestyle for me was not it, as far as not being able to get around easily. I hit a crack in the sidewalk so bad that I broke my leg, fell out of my chair, and it's well, that's the sign that I'm not supposed to stay. And another thing I realized in New York was that I missed basketball a lot.
The funny thing, she wasn't planning to play basketball when she decided to transfer to Arizona.
I wasn't even really talking to the adaptive athletic director or anyone at the time. They ran into me on campus and they knew that I was already on the USA team. And so they were like, oh, we for sure want to support you in that and give you a scholarship even if you play for one of our teams. And I was like, that sounds like a great deal. That's what I'm looking for anyway.
Josie's new team had just returned to the collegiate level, but she didn't get the chance to play for a championship. Her final year of college basketball was interrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Then her head coach stepped down.
I was thinking well, I am emotionally attached to this team now. I'm invested. I was a team captain and I just really wanted them to be successful. So I was I really want to apply for the head coach position because I'll be graduating by the time they need a coach. And yeah, luckily all the timing worked out and I got the job. I mean, yeah, it was kind of crazy because I was I've mentioned already, I went to school for writing, film, global studies. I did not anticipate being a coach, but I'm so lucky and thankful to be one of the only women's wheelchair basketball collegiate coaches in the country. And I think it's a really good fit.
What's the most rewarding part about your job right now?
It is such a cool thing that the University of Arizona is doing by providing adaptive athletes scholarships and just like more incentive to go to school, right? And we get the opportunity to help support them in that journey. And then, they're better off when it comes to finding a job in the workplace. I mean, this maybe is well known, or maybe people don't know this, but like when you have a disability, it's hard to find a job sometimes. But it makes it a little bit easier if you have a college degree to back you and say, okay, yes, like I use a wheelchair or I have a disability, whatever it may be, but I'm college educated and that is why you should hire me.
That brings us back to Josh Wheeler. He's that wheelchair rugby player from the start of this episode who didn't get his degree at BYU, but moved to Tucson to continue playing his favorite sport.
In 2018 and 2019, we actually won the national championship. That was pretty cool. And then COVID happened. Rugby basically got stopped. It was canceled for everything. And so I was not doing anything. I felt like it was time to go back to school. And I got into U of A and I got funding for it.
He decided to study accounting.
I always liked numbers growing up. I liked spreadsheets. I liked math and all that type of stuff. Accounting is a tough degree. It's not easy. But every time I took one, I was like, I like this. I like it even more. My plan was to get done with my bachelor's degree by May 2024, and I ended up getting my master's degree in that time period too. I now work at an accounting firm here in Tucson.
Josh is also a 2024 Paralympic silver medalist, but Josh's playing days for the Wildcats are over.
Unfortunately, at the end of this year, we made the decision to pull away from our support for wheelchair rugby, primarily because our student athlete numbers have gone, really low.
Yeah, it is sad because I was planning on staying and playing with the team because they've helped me out so much. And so I was planning on sticking around and helping develop the younger crew of people that were coming through.
But Josh is grateful for what Arizona provided him.
That benefited my life in ways that I probably will not know for however many years to come.
As I concluded my interview with Arizona Adaptive Sports Director Pete Hughes, I couldn't help but think of his statement that he doesn't want people to be inspired by the fact that adaptive athletes can play sports just like the rest of us. He wants us to be inspired by their awesome play on the court or track. So I asked Pete what inspires him about his Wildcat athletes.
It's a hard one because I'm not easily inspired, right? I'm more inspired by the fact that they come together as a team and a group for a common goal, and that they work and support each other. That's what really inspires me. Like the track team, we went up to Oregon, and what inspired me was that none of the men finished in the top 3, and yet the whole team stayed to cheer on the top 3 winners that happened to be from Illinois. Why did they stay? Because they saw the big picture, right? That inspired me. I tell our coaches all the time, I was like, you won't get fired for losing a game. Not here, not ever, right? The process is what counts. And I feel like we're just on the right process with these athletes.
Inspiring Greatness, Arizona's adaptive sports legacy, is produced and written by me, Cleon Wall. Music and post-production by Kevin West. Make sure you watch BYUtv's Big Stories by logging on to BYUSN.com. Big Stories is a production of BYU Radio.